Pete Calandra here. Today's video is in two parts. The first part is a playthrough of a boutique chamber strings library for Kontakt titled Sospiro Strings. This is a library performed and programmed by Ben Osterhaus and is available at the Kontakt Hub website. There's a link in the description box below. I'll play through some of the different programs and articulations, then play short musical examples that I wrote and sequenced to demonstrate this library in context. In the second part of the video, I start to discuss something I call Intervallic Harmony and how to use it to create interesting four-note chords. This video is just an intro to the concept. In upcoming videos, I'll go into more depth and also show how to string together a series of chords to create some unusual progressions with some evocative sonorities. There'll be timestamps in the description box below and in a pinned comment to help you navigate through this video. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Please leave any comments or questions below. Thanks so much for watching, and let's get started. I'm here at the Kontakt Hub website, and this is the page for Ben Osterhaus's Sospiro Strings. And let's take a quick read of the product overview. Sospiro Strings is a Kontakt library for creating slow, emotive strings. It features 4 different length swells and 3 sustained articulations recorded on bass, cello, viola, and violin. And here we are, and let's take a look at the GUI. Let's just talk about this for a second. He has this as an ensemble patch. He has solo patches for violin, viola, cello, and bass. The ensemble patch is just a mixture of all 4. He played all the instruments multi-tracking over and over again instead of having an ensemble. It sounds very good. Let's take a look here. You've got your swells and the length in beats. 2 beats, 1 bar, 1.5 bars, 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars. So let's record enable this, and now I've got it down for 1 beat, and I'll play this chord. And this is 2 beats. And 3 beats, so you can... The reason why he has vibrato and non-vibrato is that when you're time stretching some of these samples, the vibrato can sound a little off-putting. There can be a lot of artifacts in it. You can see this is very easy to set up and move. Let's do 2 bars. It's really an interesting sound. And let's add some vibrato. You can hear how all the rebowing all happens together like a nice tight ensemble. We're synchronized to our tempo, and you can multiply the length here. And then let's look at the sustains. So we've got 2 types of sustains here and a full one. Let's take a quick listen to the cold. Warm. A very controlled vibrato, I would say. Let's hear what full sounds like. So I think that that's blending the cold and the warm. Would be actually nice if there was a little mixer where you could adjust the level of the cold and the warm, or you could assign that level to a MIDI CC and automate that. That's interesting. I guess you could open up 2 instances of Sospiro and do it that way as a workaround. Maybe that'll happen with an upgrade. We'll have to see. And then you've got volume, and volume is controlled by MIDI CC11, which I've got on my fader here. I also have a foot pedal that does that, an expression pedal. And then we've got a release. I can turn the release up. And then there's a built-in IR reverb. It's not overwhelming. So you can hear with doubled. So that's a quick look at the GUI, and now let's take a look at some passages that I've worked on demonstrating how this works. Let me play this little passage here for 2-bar swells, and we'll talk about it after the playback. Some of these chords are 2 measures long and some of them are 1 measure long. And I've left a rest between some of these chords this way that there's time for the release to happen and for the next articulation to strike, and it sounds fairly smooth. You have to play around with that in order to get this to work, because if you have the notes be the exact lengths, in other words, if this was a whole note instead of a dotted half note, the transition doesn't sound as clean as it can. But by just reworking it a little bit like this, you get a really nice transition. And this is part of learning how to use a library, is learning how to adjust what you play in order to make it sound the way you want it to sound. And sometimes that doesn't look like perfect notation would. I want to talk here a little bit about something I call intervallic harmony. And this should not be the only way you think about harmony. You should learn your 4-part chord voicings based on Bach chorales. You should study that stuff, study that stuff, study that stuff. I did that as an undergraduate student, and it really helped me to learn how to voice things. And I am using 4 voice textures here, but just in a little bit different way. So everybody knows that chords are intervals stacked above each other, sounding at the same time. And most of the chords that you hear are triadic harmony. And for example, in the key of C, a C major chord is C, E, and G. So that's 2/3 stacked on top of each other. And if we wanted a C major 7th, we would add the B on top of that. You can look at that chord, and you could think of it in 2 ways. From C to E is a major third, and then stacked on top of that E is a G. That's a minor third from E to G. And from G up to B, the 4th note, that is a major third. So it's 2 major thirds and a minor third stacked on top of each other. But if you analyze that chord a little deeper, you'll know that there are 2 other intervals in there. There are 2/5, a major third apart. There's C to G, and there's E to B. What we have here are 2 intervals of a 5th stacked on top of each other. We have the E to the B and the C to the G on top of it. Another way to look at this is called a drop 2 voicing. What do I mean by that? If we take that chord and make it into close position, it would be B, C, E, and G. If we take the 2nd note from the top of that inversion and drop it down an octave, that would be this E, you would get this voicing. And I've done that with all these chords here are drop 2 voicings. The drop 2 method, and then you could have drop 3, you could have drop 2 and 4. Those ways of thinking about chords are taught typically in jazz arranging classes. And that's where I first started learning about them. But then you look at the stuff a little bit more and you expand upon what you're learning, and you can come up with different sonorities. So let's go through the rest of this playthrough, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So we can see here that this is a drop 2 of the 2nd inversion. So G, B, C, and E, and you drop the C down an octave, and you've got that voicing there, and the same here. So that's basically the two voicings that we've used so far. And then right here, this is an interesting one here. We've got a major third on the bottom and a fifth on the top. Let's look at that a little bit. What if I made that a minor third and a fifth on the top? Or what if I made that a fourth and the fifth? Or if I made that a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth and a fifth? Or you can see how we start getting some really juicy and really interesting timbres. So this is just an introduction into this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more as we go on. So that's swells over 2 bars, and let's take a look at the next one here, which is swells 1 bar. I could put a key signature right here and it would look a little bit better, but you'll be able to get the point of this music across. So let's play this back. Let's take another listen to that, and this time we'll turn the vibrato on. It's very haunting. It's beautiful to me, the sound, the playing. It's very sensitive, and it's not something else that I have in any of my other sample libraries, so it'll be very useful for me. So you notice here that I've got this bottom line is 2 beats and a quarter note, and then the top line comes in on the second beat and it's 2 quarter notes. So this unfolds at a certain rate and it kind of works out really nicely. Again, very useful as underscore. You can talk over those sounds easily, and there's still like a haunting, really beautifully emotional quality to them. Let's take a look at these chords at measure 26. These here. These are also that drop 2 or stacked, but a fragment of it. I'm missing one of the notes. So what note am I missing? Well, from my perspective, I'm missing the C on the first one, because this is an A flat major 7th in 3rd inversion. And the C an octave lower would be here. So we're going to get rid of that C and just have this fragment. And the same thing here. The net effect of not having the 3rd is it leaves the chord a little bit ambiguous. What do I mean by that? Well, is that an A flat major 7th chord, or is that an A flat minor chord with a major 7th? Is there a C or a C flat in that bottom note, as opposed to this? Or is that an F minor chord Or is that some sort of D flat chord? Or is it some sort of B flat chord? So again, this is playing around with intervals. If it was the B flat chord, we'd have a sixth on the bottom and a fifth on the top. And this way you can use your 4-note chord voicings and combining intervals to come up with very interesting sonorities. But when you want to leave it ambiguous, you get rid of one of those pitches. And it's really interesting. Now, this chord right here is a fourth above a major third. In jazz, that's a C7 chord with a sharp ninth. But we're not playing all of the pitches. We're just keeping it strictly with our 4-note voicing, and we're getting rid of the least important note of that chord, which is the fifth. If the fifth were sharped or flatted, then we would really want to hear it. In other words, if this was a 5-note chord and it was C, E, A, G sharp or A flat, B flat, and E, you'd want to hear that fifth. Or if it was a G flat instead of a G sharp, and then we have over here, this fragment here, 2 octaves lower. Right, the fifth with 3 notes below it. And then 4-note chord. All right, let's go to our next example here, which is a 4-bar swell. Did you notice there that they all changed bowing at the same time, even the notes that came in afterwards? Really evocative. Let's try something here. Let's turn the tempo up to about, let's try 114. Just picking a number arbitrarily. Sounds good. One thing that you can do is that these notes are velocity sensitive. So if I wanted to bring this out because it was a little soft, I could just raise the velocity on that note there. And when I get to that point, that should sound louder. These are more complicated harmonies. I'll talk about those in the future. I just want to stay strictly with the 4-note voicings for right now. And these are 4-note chords, and all of the swells are automated. Let me play it first, and then I'll show you how I did it. I right-clicked here on the triangle, the downward-facing triangle here, and I had it in record, enable, and I learned MIDI CC automation. And on my Nano Control 2 here, I've got this slider set up to breath control. So let me record enable this. And you can see as I move the slider, it changes the value. So I played the passage in, and then I overdubbed a little bit of this, and I just played around with the automation until I got it right. So let's show you that here. So for me, that is really, really, really helpful that you're able to automate that. It stops you from having the same articulation over and over again. It stops you from having the same length articulation over and over again. And you can use that playing technique with different note lengths in one passage. And it gives you a lot of emotional content and a lot of realism. It's really nice. Now, let me show you some of these chords that I'm using here, and we'll talk about them a little bit. Okay, we'll start right here at measure 52. So this is really a D flat down here. And up here, I've got this structure, and I'll play it on the keyboard here. And this is a 4-note voicing, and it's 2 intervals stacked. You can think of it that way. It's a 5th and a minor 3rd. What it actually contains is a fragment of a D flat major 9th chord, missing the 3rd. So I get rid of that F, and I can play this with one hand, which is really nice. It's just the spread of a 9th, which I can easily manage. And then you have a bass note below that. And to learn these voicings, you would just simply experiment with different bass notes. Right, that's B flat. How about if I put a F? What if I put a C? Or a G flat? What if I put a G? See, you come up with these really interesting textures and timbres just by playing around with this stuff and keeping a little diary. The next one here is the same upper structure, just transposed from starting with the D flat in the thumb to starting with an A flat in the thumb. And this time I've got an F in the bass. And then I've got the original one transposed down an octave. This one here is the same as this guy here. And then there's the F sharp, or actually a G flat in the bass. Kind of cool. All right, let's do to this example 5 is sustains cold. So these are not swelled notes. These are just sustains. Cold. So let's take a listen to this. It looks like I have 2 passages here. Again, another pyramid of chords. Again, another chord pyramid. Nice. So you see at the end there, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 note chord, and it still doesn't sound muddy. It's really great. And then this is a little bit more standard here. Very delicate, very tender, really beautiful. I could see that being used in many a film score. Our next one is sustained warm. And on this one, it looks like I've got 3-note voicings and then 2 notes over here. So let's take a listen to this. I think what would be really nice for this would be to have another page with a mixer where you can automate, or have a selection where you can use a MIDI slider to go between no vibrato and vibrato, between cold and warm. Maybe that'll come in an update. There are ways around that, but it'd be nice to have it all in one spot. And the next one is full. So maybe a mixer that works when you've got full enabled, so that you can blend and mix the level of each articulation, or each playing style actually. Okay, so example 8, swells with mixed duration. I've got the individual instruments set up, and each one has a different length articulation. And here's a little passage. This is very simple. This is nothing special, but you'll get the general idea. Probably could do a little work with expression here to fade this out and also to fade the first one in. Let's take another listen to that. The bottom one, obviously 4 bars long. This 2 bars long. And these are shorter note values here. One more time. I think this library is great for anyone from a student, a beginner, all the way to a professional that wants to have this type of articulation in their library catalog. And I'll certainly be using it. Now, I want to do a few more things with harmony. So let's just use the cold sound here. All right, stacking intervals. So let's talk about different intervals you can stack. So we showed a couple of examples with fifths, and I gave you this chord here. Let me turn that up. One more time. But let's take our C to G, and what happens if we add a fifth a whole step below that, or a seventh above that? That's an interesting timbre, right? Or if we add a minor second above it, a really tense chord, or a major second above it, or a diminished fifth above it. Something really dramatic. So you can see how with fifths, interesting. But you can use any interval. Stacking thirds, that's a little bit more standard. But once you start getting fourths, fifths, sixths, you can come up with some really interesting timbres. So let's try fourth. Now everybody knows that that's a standard fourth chord, right? But what happens if you take a fourth that's here, and then the fourth a half step above that? Well, let's hear them together in close position. Really tense chord, right? So let's flip that around by transposing the bottom one up an octave, and now we've got a fourth and a fifth. Or taking this and transposing it up an octave. Now, let's try something with sixths, and then I've got another point to make. So we've got a sixth here from A to F sharp. What happens if we add A flat to F above that? Really nice, right? What happens if we add E to C sharp above that? Right? A to F sharp, E to C sharp. So using these intervals and combining them together in these four-note voicings is a really interesting way to come up with sonorities. And my position on this is that when you study harmony, there are so many different ways to think about it. And you don't say that this is the only way that I'm going to do something. You say, this is my base. This is where I'm starting out with. And how can I add more tools to my toolkit? How can I add more tools to my toolkit? How can I add more colors to my palette? How can I add more techniques to increase my harmonic vocabulary to create interesting timbres and interesting sonorities? Because when you're writing music, melody is the thing that people remember the most, and rhythm is the most important part of music. Not just rhythms like drum rhythms, but rhythms in terms of how things unfold over time. That's really the most important aspect of music. But emotion comes from harmony. Now, we've got, let's say, these two fourths, a half step apart, right? We've got C, D flat, F, and F sharp. That's a pool of notes that we can use to revoice this. So we've got our F. Let's take our F and put it way down here. So we can get rid of that F there. And let's take our C, and I'm going to hold my sustain pedal down, and I'm going to play my C up here. So you can see that that's a really cool way to create an interesting timbre just by revoicing things. And it's a matter of experimentation. And when you come up with something you like, write it down, keep a diary, and then learn it in all 12 keys. And this is just my first introduction to some of these techniques. I'll keep doing more of that going forward. And what I would do is I would spend 15 minutes a day, 3 or 4 times a week, experimenting around with combining intervals to create harmonies. And the ones that I like the most, keep a diary and maybe make a little description. Tense. Reflective. Ominous or eerie. Keep a little diary of what kind of emotion it evokes. So that's the end of this video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please Please like, subscribe, ring that bell, share, and leave any comments below. I've been Pete Calandra. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.